Welcome to another episode of The Inquisitive Analysts. I'm your host, Marcus Udikang. It's the show where we chat with business analysts and project managers about their challenges and triumphs, their ideas, and their contribution to their field. It's inspiring, it's upbeat, it's exciting, but most of all, it's inquisitive. My guest today has had a fascinating career working as a project manager for a number of companies. And also he's worked for AT&T, Shaw, and TELUS. He's supported speech mail servers throughout Canada and the United States. He's worked as a project engineer support for the first nationwide high-speed satellite paging system in China. He has also worked in telecommunications fields, in the telecommunication field in Dominican Republic, Mexico, Africa, Saudi Arabia, and for the Kuwait Air Force. Please help me welcome to today's show, David Stewart. Welcome, David.
Thank you, Marcus. Thanks for having me on your show.
Very glad to have you all the way from Vancouver. So let's start off. You are president of Stewart Communications, right, which provides engineering, project management, construction management for large telecommunication companies internationally. So looking back, how did you get started as a project manager?
Yeah, as my career in electronics progressed, I sort of fell into project coordination and project management before I even knew the full scope of what project management really is. And yeah, I was at the peak of my career working with engineers in the beginning of digital encryption and mobile radio technology. The closest thing to the cell phone in those days was seeing how they communicated on Star Trek. So, and now we really do communicate like that.
Yeah, fascinating. So one thing I'm fascinated with is when you worked in Kuwait, you were a project coordinator with AT&T, and it was before, during, and after the Iraqi invasion of Kuwait. So how was it like working as a project coordinator during a war?
Yeah, it's hard to get things done. Can't go outside. Let's see. I started out, the war came as quite a surprise for me. I was, the day before the Iraqis invaded, I was sitting in a bunker with the Kuwaiti soldiers. And I was saying, we're reading in the paper, there's 1 million Iraqi soldiers at the border with Kuwait. They were doing their buildup. And they were saying, Mafi Bushkala, no problem. Well, the next day it was actually a Hawk missile site. It got walked right over at about 4 in the morning when the 1 million men decided to invade. So it was quite a surprise for me. I woke up in the morning listening to thumping noises on the roof, wondering what the heck that noise was. And well, it was a war going on. And yeah, so project management was the furthest thing from my mind at the time. I was just wondering how I was going to get out of a war zone, how I would be able to see my wife of less than a year. We had just got married. She moved to Kuwait with me. The AT&T supported the wives of their workers, employees. And yeah, so she had gotten out of the country about 2 weeks before the Iraqis invaded. So she was home here in Vancouver. She managed to get through to me on the phone. It was amazing how she could phone in the middle of a war. They called me down to the front desk, said, your wife's on the phone. Couldn't believe it. Didn't have much time to talk to her. And yeah, things got progressively worse from there. All communications was cut off. I didn't talk to her again for 2 weeks after that until I had gotten to Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. But yeah, we sat in meetings and we made plans on how we were going to get out of the country. We had some communications with people that were already out and had cell phone service. They could get close enough to the border, they could actually make a call into the country. And they were telling us to drive south for 60 kilometers and hang a left and go another 10 kilometers and hang a left and we'll meet you in the desert. It didn't quite go as planned. We drove down the highway for 60 kilometers, looking down the barrels of tanks the whole way. Iraqis were kind of unconcerned with us, although we stuck out like a sore thumb, a bunch of white faces and Chevy Caprices. But when we got close to the border, there was a checkpoint there. They were standing there with their guns pointed at us and just told us to turn around. So we did. And then we went back to our hotel, and you know, it was kind of depressing, wondering how we're going to get out, what's going to happen. There were a lot of things going on, but yeah, that was about it.
Well, fascinating. So not long after Kuwait, you know, you end up working in China as a project engineer for Glenair Technologies. So China back in the late 90s and early 2000s was a very different China from today. So how do you find the experience, or how did you find the experience working in China? Was it the good? Sorry, should I say what was the good, the bad, and the ugly, or was it roses and petals?
Well, it was kind of a relief that the Chinese people were so friendly, and they wanted to meet with us, and they wanted to speak English with us. The first time I went to China was in the mid 80s, and it was completely different. Everybody wore the same white outfits, and I was sent to a place called Jilin Province, which is way in the north of China. We spent 2 days on a train to get there. They kept our passports. It was an autonomous region where tourists weren't allowed. So it was a bit scary to, you know, give up your passport there, but they did give it back. So that was good. But it was a really good experience in all. Super friendly people, super helpful. We did have issues dealing with inspectors and things, that people that wanted kickbacks, and to get test equipment into the country, you know, they would have to put it in quarantine for what, I don't know, but you know, if you paid a little more money, you could probably get it out sooner. So those kind of things. And you know, in the end, when we finished the project there, it wasn't even worth it to try to get the test equipment out. The cost would have been more than what the equipment was worth. So we left it there, left it with the customer. So, yeah.
Oh, wow, fascinating. Okay, so in China, you worked with this modular voice processors. They call them MVPs, which included like Unix-based speech recognition or speech modulation servers. Um, Speech recognition is kind of, maybe it could be considered a precursor of artificial intelligence. But on the subject of MVPs, what are MVPs all about, and are they still being used?
Yeah, it was kind of a combination of voicemail system and messaging system, where people would call into an operator center. There were three of them, one in Guangzhou, one in Beijing, and one in Shanghai. And there were about 300 operators, stations in each one. And calls would come in, they would take a message, and they would send out a page. So, and the page went out, it went to an uplink station, and then was broadcast via satellite. And then VHF, UHF receivers would pick it up and rebroadcast it on the paging channel for that area. So, yeah, it was great technology at that time. Although we had wired all the 300 paging or operator stations with serial cables, and right at that time, IP technology started coming out, and that saved a whole lot of cabling. So we had to rip out all the serial cables and put in terminal servers, and that was, you know, the leading edge of technology at that time in 1997. That's when I got out of Kuwait in 1997, and went straight to China pretty much after that. I would work there for 9 weeks at a time, and then come back for 3 weeks, and then go back for 9 weeks. It was really fun. Staying in first class hotels in Hong Kong, and instead of flying to Guangzhou, I would take the train, which was a lot more comfortable, and get there in just about the same amount of time. By the time you check your bags and go through all the security, it was easier just to jump on the train, and worked out pretty good. I got good at it, going back and forth. And, yeah, it was a good experience. We got lots of stories in between, but we don't have time to. For,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
fascinating. Okay, so you end up working as a project manager for TELUS Mobility, right? Probably your first encounter as a project manager. What was the transition like into that role?
Yeah, it was kind of different because I was used to packing around tools and a soldering gun and doing that kind of work and working mostly to myself. But uh, there you were working as a team. They made it clear right off the bat when we started the project. This is what we have ahead of us. Okay, how are we going to do it? And we start planning it out. Who's going to take what contractors and how we're going to accept bids and get 3 quotes for every job. It's that was my introduction to project management. And after doing that for a few years, building the first what they called 3G plus, which was 3G HSPA. Um, After that came the real 4G, which is LTE, long-term evolution, and we augmented the sites after that. Once HSPA was up and running and call volumes were going up, they needed more capacity, so they moved on to LTE, which is 4G, and then there's multiple categories of that increased features and speed to where it is today. It's just amazing.
Well, yeah, no, I think it's cool. And I know that when I was in China not too long ago, 5G was the big thing. So who knows where we're going to go with that? But that's definitely the next. Okay, so what's the toughest hurdle of transition into the first project management role with TELUS, and how did you overcome it?
Yeah, I guess it was dealing with time management was the most difficult thing because as I got more and more involved in things at TELUS, I had my hands in a lot of different pies. Um, first one was building sites or augmenting existing sites where it already had cellular communications, but we had to change out antennas and put up new ones and run more feed lines and add equipment and add more power. In some cases, they have to reinforce the tower. If you need more antennas that can't support it, engineers do a tower analysis of the wind loading and weight, and everything is taken into account. Um, so there's a lot of processes that have to fall into place in order for it all to come together. One of the first things being real estate. They have to get real estate agreements sometimes on rooftops to add more antennas. Usually the landlord wants more money. Um, so all that has to be in place first before you can start work. And yeah, dealing with landlords. You get crews in that might damage something in the entranceway, or you got to fix it all and make it right. I had a company that spilled a bucket of paint down the side of a high-rise building onto um, patio furniture and everything else. Green paint. They got it all off and replaced the patio furniture. But yeah, lots of stories there.
So it's like you pour the paint on. It's, oh man, now it's another expense to clean this up and more time, taken to clean this and so on and so forth. So yeah, typical project management ups and downs.
Yeah.
So owning your own business for many years, you've been involved with tower and communications site construction project management. So can you tell us a bit about what that all encompasses?
Yeah, it was kind of interesting because with TELUS, I was on one side of the fence, awarding the contracts and defining the scope and everything for the project and sending it out for tender. And then when I went to work for Trilon TSF, then I was on the other side of the fence. I was the one doing the bidding, going there on bid walks, looking to see what all the work was, what the access would be, everything that would involve costs, and have to put a price on it and submit a bid. If you won the bid, you were obligated to do it for that price. So if you underestimated, that's too bad. You lose money and you don't keep your job long.
Oh man, jeez.
But yeah, it went fairly well, and I learned a lot from the other side of the fence, what contractors have to go through, and you know, trying to get quotes from your suppliers for steel, for delivery, for cranes, and you know, hiring the right people that aren't going to be a liability to you of somebody causing some problems at a tower site. And there's all the security requirements and that you have to go through. TELUS has a very strict policy of vetting. They provide a security badge to people, but you have to go through background RCMP security checks, everything. So unless you have that badge, you don't go on TELUS property. So,
Oh well, fascinating.
yeah,
Interesting. Yeah, it's something that I don't think a lot of people notice, because there's a lot of project managers, especially in the IT world, who are just sitting at a desk and they're not really out in the field type of thing. So I mean, you bring about a completely different perspective, especially with construction, right? Because you have to be on the site, like you said, you know, it's all about safety, hiring the right people, security, and all this kind of stuff. So I think it gives a really different perspective than we tend to see a lot of on the IT side. So yeah,
yeah.
cool stuff.
Central offices. I was working in California, and a guy fired up a soldering iron in a central office. And that's a no-no, because there's sensors that detect heat and release halon, and the whole building had to be evacuated, and that was really bad. But fortunately, I had stepped out for lunch when he did that. He wasn't working with me or affiliated with me. Came back, what's wrong? I can't go back inside. Somebody, yeah, somebody set off the fire suppression system.
Jeez, that's just insane.
Yeah.
The ups and downs of project management. So
Yeah.
so now you're a project manager with InSite Platform Partners, right, in Greater Vancouver.
Yes.
What's it like working this new role? Like how are you applying all the lessons learned from all your previous roles into this new project manager role?
Yeah. Well, it's really good, because I have the experience out in the field to know what things are really like, and you know, when you make a commitment to do something, there's costs involved with it, and shipping costs, and you know, uh, getting it to the customer, and making sure that you know, it's the right solution for their project or business. And in the case of InSite Platform Partners, which make a device called SkyTracker. It's a small little box that sticks by magnets onto a tank. It has a Hall effect sensor that plugs on the existing gauge and reads the tank level. It also takes the temperature and the GPS position, and it saves that all in a payload. And when the satellite comes over, it sends it to the satellite. Satellite sends it to an application interface where customers can access it and access a dashboard and see their tank levels, the history. You know, they can tell if it's been filled. They can tell if there's been a 10% drop in a short period of time. Actually, seen one client use that as to catch fuel thieves, and they probably never knew how they got caught. They were driving up to the top of a mountain in a big fuel tank with their pickup trucks with tidy tanks in the back, and stealing fuel. And they just set it to notify them if there's a 10% drop after 6 p.m. And there was, and they sent the RCMP up to meet them. It was bad news for them.
Jeez, gosh, that's hilarious. That's too funny.
It's a really neat device, and there's with all the new technologies coming out in NB, IoT, and LTE-M, uses a very narrow bandwidth of the LTE channels to send small amounts of data, and it's super cheap and battery energy efficient. These things will run off of 6 AA batteries for 5 to 7 years, even longer, depending on how many times they transmit. Some of them only transmit once every 3 days. On bulk tanks, they can use them, they transmit every hour. And the company I'm working for, they've been in business, in this business for 17 years. There's a lot of new tank monitor companies in the business, but they don't have the experience of InSite platform partners and all the background knowledge of what the business requires and the kind of people that you're dealing with. You know, to install these, a lot of times it's a truck driver. He's driving the bobtail truck with a load of propane on it, and he's got this little device that he's got to stick on the tank and stick on the gauge, and that's it. So it works out pretty good. And business owners, you know, some of these companies that deliver fuel, and they have multiple customers that they want to get them, you know, they can get them fuel at the lowest price. They can also, because this device monitors the fuel usage, they can be billed by usage. So that means the company can store their fuel in the tanks instead of storing it in their bulk tanks, because the customer is only paying for what they're using, but they can make use out of the empty space in the tank, keep it full. The customer benefits because they get fuel that was purchased when prices were low instead of in peak seasons in the middle of winter, things like that. So also with InSite platform partners, I'm working with developing their new products. So working with designers in India, software company in St. Louis, and incorporating our features and bringing the product to fruition, development. I get to deal with all sides of it, right from designing the enclosure that it goes in. It's going to be an IP68 enclosure, which could be submerged under a meter of water for a half an hour and not leak. That's been one of the drawbacks of electronics in these environments. Don't take well to water. And it's been a problem in the past, but they've got around that now, got it fixed, and InSite Platform Partners has a very reliable product that's been out there in many cases for years, even more than 10 years, some of them, and they're still working. So off a bunch of batteries.
Off a bunch of batteries. So
Yeah.
So if you were to look back at your career and the way you got started into project management, any advice for anyone wanting to become a project manager out there, the steps, maybe 1 or 2 or 3 steps they could take to get into the field?
I would say study the Rita McCarthy,
Yeah.
kind of like the Cole's Notes of the PMI guide. I read 2 versions of it. I never did get my project management certification, but that's what I've been doing, and companies have been quite happy to with my experience and my understanding of all that. I make it work, and complete the project, and get it done on time, on budget.
That's what we're all looking for, on time, on budget.
Yeah.
That's true. Yeah. So how anyone wants to get in touch with you, with either InSite Platform Partners or with your own company, your own communication company, how can anyone in the audience get in touch with you if they want to?
Okay, well, they can email me at stewcom1000, that's 1000, at earthlink.net, or at InSite Platform Partners, it's dstewart at one-tank.com, and or on my LinkedIn.
And you're on LinkedIn as David Stewart.
Yeah.
Okay, great, fantastic. Well, thanks, Dave. This has been really splendid. And like I said, it's a different view of a project manager. Instead of sitting down at the desk and looking at a computer screen all day, you're out in the field. And I think that kind of gives a completely different perspective for the audience. So that's so thanks for coming on the show.
All right. It's been a pleasure. Thanks.
All right, you're welcome. Have a great day.
All right. Thanks, Marcus.